Rep. Boyd, on your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. Good morning to the members of the committee. I am bringing forth today House Bill 346, which is to provide an exception for rape and incest. I have been confined to these 3 minutes, so I had several different testimonies I wanted to give about a 10-year-old being raped, carrying a child. Rep. Moore told me about a 9-year-old, but I've decided to share my own story. I am the product of a 15-year-old. My sperm donor was 28 years old. My mother
I'm
was
sorry, can y'all close that door in the back, please? Thank you.
My mother most likely had been being violated as young as 13, considering the fact that she gave birth to me at 15. What I can tell you today in my mid-50s is that I know that my mother never recovered from that. She was dead before she was 28 years old because no one took time to take care of the child that had been violated by a predator. So today I bring this bill in hopes that we understand that girls now as young as 9 years old are becoming young ladies and take the risk of being violated by a predator, usually someone that they know. Statistically, 9 times out of 10, it's by someone that they know. We can't expect babies at 9 who are just trying to understand themselves, coming into hormonal changes, to understand being violated by an adult, then carrying a child to term. I have one daughter, because at the time, with my husband and I, my pregnancy was horrible as an adult. I was sick every day. I had gestational diabetes. These children can also have high blood pressure. As I was stating, we have to, as a body, be concerned with the life of children that are being sought out after predators. If we are really pro-life, we have to be concerned with the children who are conceived in trauma, born into trauma, and then lived in trauma.
Let me just, I don't want to keep starting and stopping you. If we could just take about a 5-minute recess. I want to make sure the board is working, and I don't want to interrupt you again. Okay, I think you just fixed it. Again, Rep. Boyd, I can't apologize enough for what just happened. It was completely unintentional, and whenever you're ready, you can go forward.
I'm sorry.
We're ready. It's fixed.
Okay. I think it's very important for us to move forward with this body with an intention to protect our youth, our children. If we are pro-life, we have to be concerned with more than just the baby in utero. No one looked out for my mother. No one looked out for me once I was born. My mother, then in her own struggles, before she was 30 years old, was dead. I am concerned about where we are in this state with no provisions for rape and incest. I can't imagine my daughter at 15, who was a true 15-year-old, carrying a child. My granddaughter, who is now 10, who just became a young lady, who is every bit of a 10-year-old, carrying a child to term. We have to be concerned where we are from here in this state and what we want to set out to protect our children who are being violated by predators. That's my personal story, but I have stories here of a 10-year-old child raped by a 27-year-old who had to leave the state where she was to go to have an abortion done. Rep. Moore shared a story with me last week about a 9-year-old raped. I am here to present HB 346, because it's my personal testimony. I've seen what it can do, what it did do, and I want to see something changed from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Boyd. We have a stack of cards, green cards that are present and wish to speak in support. If you would you allow me to bring up 3 witnesses? And we have, again, ladies and gentlemen, if this is something that you would like to speak on, and bring the card to the Sergeant at Arms now, because I'm not going to pull in late cards. We've got a lot of people that want to speak on both sides of this matter. I have, at this time, we have a president which would like to speak, Morgan Lamondre, Katie Hunter-Lowry, and Kimio Harris-Williams, MD, if you could come up and take the table. Again, please be mindful of the box in front of you that will give you 30 seconds notice before we run out of time. Who would like to go first?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Morgan Lamondre with STAR, and I just want to say that obviously the issue of abortion is not an easy topic for us to discuss. We all have sincerely held beliefs based on our experiences, our philosophical and religious perspectives, and if we could all just start from that place, I think, that helps us with the conversation. And coming from that, there are people who do not believe or view that conception alone means a new life has been created. And for them, abortion is not wrong in that situation. And I stand before you as someone who was once vice president of the pro-life club in high school. And over the last few years, in particular the last 4 years of my own life, my perspectives have changed working with sexual assault survivors. And when we think about valuing life, we can't sit here and say we truly value life if we don't value the life of the survivor of sexual assault, who undoubtedly may consider, attempt, and succeed at committing suicide. That is a reality. And we have empathy and compassion for those who have been conceived from rape and who are here with us today because their mothers made the choice to carry the pregnancy to term. And if we want to bring God into this, then we need to not only acknowledge that God gives us free will, but that he also knows the choices that we will make. And although it may be hard to digest, there is a difference between something that exists and then doesn't versus something that never was. And STAR supports survivors in all their decisions. There are survivors who have come to STAR that became pregnant as a result of rape, and some have made the decision to terminate their pregnancies. We support them. Some have come to us, have placed their child for adoption. We support them. There are some that have decided to carry and then raise their child. We support them, and we also have provided free legal representation to them to terminate the parental rights of rapists. We will always support survivors. And we know the realities for survivors when it comes to engagement with the criminal legal system. It just doesn't happen. When it does happen, the majority of survivors experience what is known as secondary trauma, which can be just as or even more traumatic than the rape itself. When you couple that with also forcing a survivor to disclose to police their desire to have an abortion, you could potentially be putting the survivor's life at risk depending on the circumstances. This is extremely dangerous. By forcing survivors who want abortions to give birth, you are forcing them to forever be connected and controlled by their rapists. In Louisiana, men are allowed to choose the mothers of their children regardless of what a woman may want. And I hope that really sinks in. And, it is disingenuous to say that potentially forcing a survivor to give birth is somehow, having an abortion is somehow more traumatic than forcing a survivor to give birth. I just think that we need to be really authentic. And
thank you, Ms. Lamondre. We're over time.
Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the representatives of the Criminal Justice Committee. I'm Dr. Kimio Harris-Williams. I am a board-certified pediatrician. I trained at LSU School of Medicine, and I've practiced medicine for over 25 years in the state of Louisiana and Georgia. And I am in support of House Bill 346. I've seen thousands of patients, thankfully not thousands of patients who were victims of rape or incest, but I have seen hundreds of patients that have been victims. And I am in support of this bill because the sexual violation of their bodies takes away their rights. And to take away the right to make a decision about their bodies as a result of that will continue to perpetuate that violence. And so I've seen the results of rape and incest on these children's lives. You have to understand mentally their capacity to deal with this type of situation is not the same as an adult would be. And so to take that decision away from them and their families is something that I would ask that you consider, because the victims I've seen are from all socioeconomic areas in the state. They're rich, they're poor, they're rural, they're urban. This affects everyone. And it could be your cousin, it could be your niece, it could be your daughter. These things happen. And so to take their ability to make a decision about their bodies, and that ability has already been taken, it will just continue to perpetuate the abuse to them. So I would say that I would ask you to consider this bill, and I support this bill from a medical standpoint. I'm here as a medical provider, and I understand and have seen the repercussions, not just to the victims of the sexual offense, but also to the babies born as a result of it. And so I'm here to ask that you consider to support this bill 346.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Katie Hunter Lowry. I coordinate the Louisiana Survivors for Reform Coalition. We're here in support of this bill because many members of our coalition, like myself, are survivors of rape. I was raped by someone I was dating, and obviously no one thinks that's going to happen to them until it happens to you. And some survivors fight back in those situations to protect themselves, and they go to prison with life without parole. And some of us don't fight back in those situations, and you just have to wait till it's over. And that was the most horrible experience of my life. And I lived with so much shame for years, thinking that I had done something wrong. I tried to tell myself I shouldn't feel as bad about it because I didn't have to go to the hospital, or I wasn't nearly killed like some survivors of violence are. In the aftermath of that experience, one of the few things that kept me from completely flying off the edge was knowing that at the time I lived in a state where if I had become pregnant from that sexual violence, I would not have to carry a forced pregnancy. And while that was not enough to heal me from the situation, I mean, I'm still experiencing, obviously you can see me crying, I'm still experiencing the PTSD and impacts of that experience, but at least I knew that. At least I knew that if I had become pregnant from that rape, I would not have to go through the incredibly dangerous process of being pregnant, and I would not have to carry a pregnancy to term that I did not want to have, because that was not my choice to conceive a child in that moment. I am in this committee a lot. There's a lot of talk about supporting victims and that this committee tries to make decisions to support victims. If you are forcing rape and incest survivors in Louisiana to carry forced pregnancy, you are not supporting victims. Hard stop. It's not, there's no gray area. If you consider yourself and are going to tell your constituents in the fall that you work to support public safety and support survivors, you have to support this bill, and you cannot force survivors to carry pregnancies that were conceived through violence. Thank you.
We have a question from Rep. LaFleur.
And this can be from any panel member, and hopefully I can phrase it in a question. Is it your opinion that to not have exceptions for rape and incest is further victimization of a victim?
Yes.
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 Yeah, the re-traumatization that we hear about from our members in Louisiana Survivors for Reform ranges from, their friends and family not believing them, to interactions they've had with police and the criminal legal system that was re-traumatizing, and absolutely not being able to have access to the medical care you need following an experience of rape or incest is re-traumatization. Absolutely.
And
So in the work,
I was going to
Morgan?
say, one of the things too that isn't often considered is the fact that there are survivors come in various, have different responses, different reactions. And even the survivors I know that did carry a pregnancy through term, every single one of them had considered abortion. But it's the natural process of things. And without abortion being an option in Louisiana, the instinct that's happening now is that people are immediately planning and going to other states to have an abortion rather than going through the natural process of coming, whether it's through a supportive measure or really having time to evaluate if that's truly what they want to do. And unfortunately, by creating a system that makes somebody feel they have to hurry up and flee to another state, they may be doing or making a decision that they actually wouldn't want to make. And so that for us is supporting survivors in all their decisions, and that does include if they want to carry the pregnancy to term. But because in our state we have created an environment where it's not even potentially an option, the instinct is to hurry up, get funds together to flee to go to another state. And I think that is actually where you're going to see people in the future having regrets because it's not truly the process that they wanted to take.
So in the women that you two provide sort of services to, what percentage of those women, those victims, actually dial up the phone and report that they are a victim of rape or incest?
To police or?
To police.
I mean, it's, it really, obviously if it is a minor and somebody calls STAR, we have mandatory reporters on staff, and they have to report that. But in general, in particular with adults, maybe 15, 20%, and that's STAR's clients. They may eventually report. A lot of survivors tend to report when it becomes the they said, he said, and they see that their perpetrators have done this repeatedly. But in general, I would say it's more around the 20% mark.
Somebody's leaning on the light switch.
I would also say that, going back to your initial question, so this is a victimization that perpetuates. Mm-hmm. And so mentally, this is something that going through a pregnancy for 40 weeks, that poses continual mental anguish to the victim. You're already emotional. There are emotional changes as it relates to a pregnancy. And so there's a continual victimization of the victim. And so not having the option to make a decision is added to that. And then thinking about the different ages, so your mental capacity at 10 is different from 15, is different from 17, is different from 18, is different from 20, 25. So you have to think about all of those things and how that forms the person as an adult and how it impacts a person as an adult. And so another thing to think about is unsafe abortions. So will this push people into doing things that are not safe in order to, get the end up where they want, the decision they want to make. And so you have to consider those things as well.
Yeah, thank you. Because I think often in these discussions, we fail to talk about the mental harm that is and can be done, as well as the financial sort of issues that need to be dealt with as well. So I appreciate you and your comments. I appreciate you ladies for being here today.
And I want to say this as well, because of the mental health crisis and the lack of resources and access to mental health care, that adds on to the complexity of the situation, because mental health services are really very limited in the state, definitely as it relates to children.
And Rep. LaFleur, to answer your question, I sat here and I can think of 6 women in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of survivors we've organized over the past 3 years who reported to police. The vast majority do not. And in Louisiana, to receive financial reimbursement from the Crime Victims Reparations Fund to get things like therapy, medical bills, lost wages, funerals paid for rape survivors, you haven't had to report to police to receive those services for a long time. If you get a forensic medical exam, that automatically gets transmitted to the Crime Victims Fund, and then that is your proof, essentially, and then you can receive those benefits from the state.
All right, thank you, ladies. We have no more witnesses. We have no more questions for you at this time. I've got 3 more. I have, looks like 9 total more people that want to speak in support. At this time, Frankie, I don't know if that's Robertson. I can't read it. It is. Robertson, okay. Adele London, Nicole Freehill. If you'd like to come up at this time, are all 3 here? Okay, we have 2. Adele London, is Adele London in the room? All right, we're going to pass her. We're going to go to Patrice Sams. Aboden, I can't, that Aboden, is Patrice present? Okay, yes, okay, coming down. Okay, yes, ma'am, state your name and begin.
Good morning, my name is Frankie Robertson, and I'm providing testimony on behalf of Reverend Deneen Robinson of the National Birth Equity Collaborative, here henceforth known as the Collaborative, in support of offering exceptions to the current abortion laws for rape and incest. I first like to start off saying that I do believe that this will probably be one of the most difficult opportunities for me to testify thus far in my experience in testifying. And as I shared, this testimony is on behalf of Reverend Deneen Robinson. My daughter was gang raped at the age of 17 on her way home from school. She knew one of the boys. She thought they were friends, but the other boys were his friends. She kept it a secret except for telling me she needed to go to the doctor for a checkup. I found out in the hallway at the doctor's office, looking over the labs the doctor ordered, and turning with a frightful face to the physician and asking why we are ordering STI, pregnancy, and HIV tests. The doctor could not tell me. She turned to my daughter and invited us back into a patient room so she could ask my daughter if she wanted to share what was going on. My daughter took that moment to share with me that she had been gang raped. In that moment, all the signs I had been seeing made sense. The sullen movement, the sudden fear of riding the bus alone, the not eating, the quiet behavior, as she just was such a vibrant child. Fast forward, all the tests came back negative. But during the waiting, we were in counseling every day, and the family disclosure she could have had the support she needed was important because it was possible that she could run into the person while moving around our neighborhood. It was a truly difficult time. We were not sure she would survive as she experienced suicidal ideation as a result. To think, as in addition to the harm she suffered, that she may have had to parent a child that would have resulted from this rape was incomprehensible. She simply would not have survived it. It took us many years as a family to recover, and in some ways, she is still experiencing PTSD from this rape. Please do not put another young girl through the added trauma of being forced to parent on top of the already horrific act of rape or incest. In pregnancies resulting from incest, the person maintains close family and emotional relations with the aggressor. This is different from what occurs when pregnancy results from sexual violence by strangers. Evidence indicates that this type of relationship with the aggressor may interfere in the dynamics of such violence and the adolescent's access to health services. We need laws that will protect the person violated and not the aggressor. Individuals that have experienced violence at the hands of a rapist should not also have to be concerned about how to parent while trying to work through the harm of loss in safety and security. Working through rape trauma often involves loss of employment, loss of housing, loss of basic necessities, and ultimately stability in association with being stripped of dignity as a result of surviving sexual assault. Should this law not pass, the victim would be required to petition the court to have the rights of the violator terminated, and the victim must prove by clear and convincing evidence either that the respondent was convicted for a felony sexual assault against the petitioner through which the child was conceived, or that the respondent committed.
Ms. Robinson, I
May I
hate
just close?
very briefly.
Yes.
I have a lot of people's time. I also want to speak, so.
I'll close. Thank you very much for your consideration. As a pastor, I want my congregants to have access to as many options as possible so they could decide what works best for them. I would want them to have resources so that they could get the care they needed. And most importantly, I would want them to know that their community was not doing anything to impede their ability to move through the difficulties associated with rape and incest. It is important that we as advocates, legislators, families, and friends do everything possible to protect the overall well-being of people in Louisiana. Signed, Reverend Denny Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, ma'am. And again, look, when I'm stopping y'all at the timer, please try to pay attention. I don't like to do that, but we have a room of people and a lot of bills that a lot of people want to speak on. And I do not mean to be disrespectful, but I do need to try to maintain this time limitation. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Nicole Freehill. I am a practicing OBGYN physician in New Orleans, and I wanted to testify in support of this bill. I have personally had many patients who have been the victims of both rape and incest, a variety of ages, situations. I have one example of a patient that I just took care of at the end of last year. She was 14 years old at the time, had been repeatedly raped by her uncle, had been threatened, so she never spoke of this to any of her other family members. She came to the emergency room one day with abdominal pain and was found to be 19 weeks pregnant. This young woman had already experienced so much trauma, and she really could not comprehend the situation she was in. The trauma she had already been undergoing repeatedly was complicated by the fact that she was being told she was pregnant. It was just horrific. And I think that women and young girls in this situation should not be forced to have a legal boundary on them when they are trying to figure out, like someone else has said, who they even are, let alone what they're going through and what they have been through. There is no other area in medicine, no other situation that I can think of where police reporting needs to be involved. From my doctor-patient relationship, it is there's no other instance where the patient needs to report confidential information to a third-party person first for me to then do my job as the physician. And I think that that's what we're trying to help with this bill, is for the doctor-patient relationship to be kept intact for these victims. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning again. I'm Dr. Patrice Samsa-Biadoon. I serve as Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast, where we hear directly from patients who are harmed by the devastating laws banning essential health care in our state. Let me be clear. Louisiana's extreme abortion ban is putting your constituents' lives and health at risk every single day. By supporting this bill, you have an opportunity to be on the right side of history today and to begin to mitigate some of this grievous, preventable harm. As I sit here today, it could not be clearer that Louisiana must protect the most vulnerable among us. And that means doing everything in our power to ensure survivors of sexual assault can access the basic health care they need, including abortion if they choose it. Forcing anyone to carry a pregnancy against their will is inhumane and dangerous. Forcing survivors of rape and incest to do so is robbing them of their agency to control their bodies all over again. And the data is overwhelmingly clear. 70% of Louisianians support a measure to allow for abortion in the case of rape or incest. This includes the Louisianans who sent each of you here to be their voice. As legislators, you were elected to serve your constituents' interests, not to intrude on their personal medical decisions or double down on the trauma that sexual assault survivors have already endured. I'm asking you to look within, to imagine your loved ones, especially your children, in this position, and to ask yourself, what would you want for them? Surely it is freedom. No matter how you have voted in the past, today you can do the right thing by your constituents and all Louisianans by supporting this bill. Thank you, Rep. Boyd, for your boldness in carrying this bill and sharing your story. And thank you to everyone who has testified and shown up today for your courage. Thank you.
I have a question for either of the doctors on the panel. What are the dangers to a very young child that is been impregnated to go forward? What happens to a very young child, or what are the potential dangers for that child?
Extremes of age in pregnancy, so very young or very old, have a higher risk of preterm labor, preterm birth, preeclampsia, severe complications. And just carrying a pregnancy to term, women are anywhere from 30 to 50 times more likely to die from a full-term pregnancy than an abortion. So just to give some clarity as to what, the death in childbirth is rare, needs to be lower numbers, but it's still rare. But when you get to if someone is a sexual assault victim and chooses an abortion, that technically is a safer option for them if that's what they choose.
Representative Bryant.
If you can answer, in what ways does the trauma of the event affect the pregnancy?
So there's been a lot of discussion about mental health conditions, trauma, and how an emotional state of a mother can affect a pregnancy. It's really unclear. I can tell you that depending on how they are taking care of themselves, are they taking their vitamins? Are they coming to appointments? Are they eating appropriately? Are they taking any medications they may need? That can obviously affect a pregnancy, but just the emotional toll, that is really hard to clarify and to put into like a black and white context.
So if a mother is going through a lot of trauma and it affects her ability to hold weight, affects her ability to eat, affects her ability to go through her daily functions and everything else, it definitely have an effect on the baby's outcome, correct?
It could, yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
and that happens 99% of the time when someone is likely going through those types of traumas.
Well,
correct?
through the trauma of rape, I would say yes, it's very likely in my experience from the patients I've seen.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rep. LaFleur.
Yes, this is for the doctor. How has this ban that is in place transformed or affected your current practice?
The main way is when patients have come to me in these situations, I can still counsel them on all of their options. However, obviously here in the state at this time, the choice of an abortion if they are a rape victim or an incest victim is not available to them. And having to think about how are they going to get to a state that can allow them to have an abortion is very traumatic in and of itself. And I've had several patients who financial means and even just transportation to leave the state is extremely difficult. And that's the situation where it's been very hard for me saying, there's nothing else I can do for you. It's very hard. I went to medical school and I became a physician to help people. And one of the things I love doing, why I chose OBGYN, is delivering healthy babies, having healthy pregnancies. And when I see someone suffering and there's no way for me to help them, it's very difficult.
Thank you. The board is clear. Let me bring up the next set of people who are present in support and wish to speak. We have Audrey Wascombe, Vera Chapman Seals, and Nalima Suknavasi. I'm sorry if I did not say that name correctly.
I'll just take my seat for only one.
And you are?
I'm Audrey Wascombe.
Okay, and do we have Vera Chapman Seals present? All right, we're going to pass her. Mary Ann Mushat. She present? All right. And, present and wishing to speak also is Andrea Dubé. Is she present? Is that you, ma'am? Is that you? Yes. Okay, good. All right. You can go. You can proceed. You can go first, Miss Wascombe.
Oh,
you can
apologize.
begin. Go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Audrey Wascombe. I live in Baton Rouge with my husband and two sons. And for the last 25 years, I've been an advocate in the field of violence against women. My professional life includes, but is not limited to, having accompanied victims and advocate for them during forensic exams and in possible court proceedings, training volunteers to answer a crisis line, training law enforcement, speaking to thousands of people on being a survivor and the breakdown and failures of systems meant to protect survivors, testifying for a grand jury trial, testifying in front of our legislature on sexual and domestic violence, and writing for national outlets on the subject. 41% of sexual assaults that occur before the age of 18, and the majority identify as female. Over 20 years ago, within a month of each other, I was called to the hospital in the middle of the night for two unrelated cases. Both cases were 9-year-old little girls who were both impregnated when they were 8 years old after being raped. One little girl was in her second trimester, the other in her third. Neither knew that they were pregnant, but how could they? They were still playing with dolls. I didn't choose advocacy, it chose me. For the first decade of my life, I was raped by my grandfather with the assistance from my grandmother. He once tried to murder me, and the scar tissue is extensive enough that my bladder does not work the way it's supposed to. Then, on my 17th birthday, I was raped. I became an advocate after not getting emergency contraceptives within the 72-hour window. I have told my story thousands of times, tens of thousands of times, and I have written about it hundreds of times. And yet there is a very significant part that until today, outside of law enforcement and my therapist, only a handful of people I trust knew. For that first decade of my life, my grandparents made child pornography of me and essentially blackmailed me with it. This is a part of my story that I would rather have kept private, and I most likely would have if the stakes weren't so high for future survivors. Because our state has taken the choice away from survivors of rape and incest for the chance to recover, I sat my 2 boys down this past week so that they could hear the rest of the story, the part I never wanted public, and the part that I was not ready to share with them from me. The reason is this. The only difference between me and those little girls is timing. That's it. Every time that I was raped and it was photographed, it fell on a day that I couldn't get pregnant. A full decade of my life was nothing but roulette. My story is not unique. And for the little girls that I saw 20 years ago, and for future survivors, I'm putting my right to privacy aside for the sake of salvaging someone else's life. I
Ms.
see the
Watson, if
time.
you-
I've
yeah,
got one sentence.
Thank you.
I love Louisiana, and there are future survivors that love Louisiana. It's time that Louisiana loves us back.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's next. Either one.
Good morning,
Go.
everyone. My name is Dr. Neelima Sukhavasi, and I'm here in support of House Bill 346 by Representative Boyd. I'm a board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist who's been practicing here in Baton Rouge for the past 5 years. I have dedicated my career to taking care of the underserved population in Louisiana, and I take care of people from all across the state who come to us for care. I believe this includes all aspects of reproductive health care. And so during my career, I have seen women of all ages, young girls who have been victims of incest. In fact, I've taken care of an 11-year-old girl who was molested by a family member who was trusted to take care of her. She carried her pregnancy to term, and I personally don't know how she made it through that. And I can't imagine how women and girls can do that and have to go on with their lives as children, go back to school. This takes them out of school. This limits their education. It affects their mental health, like so many people have talked about before. And I've seen the repercussions of women who have been sexual assault survivors in future pregnancies, desired pregnancies. They have issues with tolerating exams for their preventive health care. And I believe all of this is related to the trauma that they've endured. And so please, I ask you to support this bill to help minimize the trauma for these victims of rape and incest and allow them the decision to have the option of terminating a pregnancy if they choose.
Yes, ma'am.
Me? Okay. Bear with me, I did time this, but I've never talked about this publicly, so if someone wants to turn off that light now, I probably would appreciate it. My name is Andrea Dubé. I'm from New Orleans, and this is such a deeply partisan issue, and for many of us, it has become so dehumanizing. And it's not lost on me that in order to fight for our right to privacy, women must reveal the most intimate details of their most traumatic experiences. But if that's what it takes, then I'm here to do it. And I want you to know that I am here in good faith, and that this isn't an ideological or intellectual exercise, but the decisions you make today will affect our state's most vulnerable women deeply. And I ask that you don't let this be a run-of-the-mill day for you. We talk a lot about choice when we talk about abortion, on both sides. And I often hear if a woman chooses to have sex, but what if you don't choose? What happens when your choice is taken from you forcibly? When I was a teenager, I was raped by a stranger. I did all the correct things. I went to the police immediately. I did the medical exam. I went through the criminal investigation and trial. The moment I walked into the police station, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was going to feel protected, going to feel safe. But I was belittled, dismissed, and reduced to body parts. They asked me over and over again if I was sure, because I would be ruining a man's life. And I'm not sure about his life now, but he didn't spend a day in jail, and I'm still in therapy 20 years later. When you report a rape, you have to repeat the details over and over again to rooms full of people for months in excruciating detail. And please understand that I have a memory every single day, and some days are worse than others, and some days it's just a flicker. And what you may not expect is that many of those memories involve the police station and the courtroom. And it baffles me when people accuse women of false accusations, because let me remind you that no one makes these accusations for the fun of it. We're dehumanized, smeared, and pretty much always robbed of justice. And in the crippling pain and shame and fear of your own credibility for the rest of your life, why on earth would a woman choose to go through this? And someone watching this right now will likely be a victim of rape in the future. And I struggle with this knowledge because I know they may hear me and decide not to report, because all we do is tell them how horrible reporting is, how it's a trauma that rivals the actual rape itself. And I would never discourage a woman from reporting a rape, but knowing everything I know, I cannot with clear conscience encourage her. When I did the rape medical exam, they told me to come back in a month for the pregnancy test. A month I spent in total and complete agony. Imagine for a moment if you had a 16-year-old daughter and she was raped. Now imagine if she has to carry a rapist baby, and probably made even worse because there will likely be no justice and he will likely never spend a day in jail. What would that even look like? Would he have parental rights? He would be in your daughter's life, your life forever. And I want you to know that it would never have gotten to that point for me. There's no doubt in my mind that if I had been forced to carry my rapist baby, I would have killed myself. I'm almost finished. For many women like me, being forced to stay pregnant and give birth would be a death sentence. This is your chance to save actual lives, and at the very least to give some semblance of dignity to some of the most vulnerable people out there. If not, you are condemning an innocent woman to be attached to a violent criminal for the rest of her life. Giving abortion access to rape victims is a humane thing to do. Thank you for your time.
Rep LaFleur.
Thank you for your testimony. Audrey, I am so proud of you, my friend.
Thank you. It was comforting when I realized you were on the sea today, when you were one of the few that knew.
Yeah.
You've been through it with me.
And I will continue to go through this process for you, with you, and for you and with you. Rep Void, your pain matters to me. And I just need you to know that. I love you.
Love you too.
Thank you. The board is clear. At this time, the remaining Rep Knox, the board is not clear.
I was going to wait for the author, but...
Okay, yeah, we will have the author back. Thank you. At this time, I have present and not wishing to speak in support, green cards. I'm not going to individually read these in, but I'm going to place them into the record and say that there are 113 cards in support. And we have now people that would like to speak in opposition to this matter. Sancha Smith, Deborah Melvin, and Dr. Damon Cudahy are all three present. Yes, ma'am. State your name.
Good morning. I'm Debbie Melvin from Thibodaux, and I'm happy to be here to speak on behalf of those who can't speak for themselves. The experience of abortion itself is a violation of a woman's physical integrity and is likely to be even more pronounced in women with a history of being sexually abused or raped. By its very nature, abortion requires a violation of a woman's body. Imagine this. She's laid on her back. Her cervix must be forcefully opened. Her womb must be penetrated, suctioned, and scraped. This can be like a second rape to her. When a woman is raped, she often blames herself and feels guilty, as though it was her fault somehow. These women hunger for respect, love, and justice. Abortion simply cannot fill these needs because it is inherently a destructive act. Abortion does nothing to heal broken hearts or empower women. Abortion does not bring healing to a rape victim. Imposing the death penalty on an innocent child of a sex offender does nothing bad to the rapist, but nothing good for the woman. Creating a second victim does not undo the damage to the first. It's hard to imagine a worse therapy for a woman who has been raped than to add the guilt and turmoil of having her child killed. A baby is the only beautiful thing that can come out of a rape. Having and holding an innocent child can do much more good for a victimized woman than the knowledge that an innocent child died in an attempt to deny or reduce her trauma. There's a common argument that a child conceived by such a vile act will be a constant reminder of their pain. On the contrary, the innocence of the child often has a healing effect. But in any case, the woman is free to place the child for adoption, which could be the best alternative for her. Aborting the child is an attempt to deny what happened, and denial is never good therapy. The provisions in HB 346 do not require any of the following: a police or investigatory report, forensic evidence provided by the pregnant female, or prosecution of the alleged offense. And I would like to remind us all of the young woman called Roe in the famous Roe v. Wade case, who elicited sympathy from the court and media because she claimed to be a rape victim. Years later, admitted she had lied and had not been raped at all. No police or investigatory report, no forensic evidence provided, no prosecution of the alleged offense. And now 50 years later, we want to go back there and open things up for there to be abortion on demand. Most do not know that Norma never had her abortion. She
Melvin,
delivered a healthy baby girl.
Thank you, Ms. Melvin.
I ask for you to vote no.
Thank you.
My name is Sancha Noel Smith. I'm a former sitting judge. I'm a former victim of both rape and abortion. And so for me, this issue is very, very personal. I didn't always grow up respecting life, but here I sit before you. Each one of us called for purpose. You serve the state of Louisiana and her constituents, her families, because the Lord gave life to you and your parents chose to give you life, and you are here on purpose and for purpose. And so you don't add insult to injury. Behind a rape and the trauma that creates, you don't kill the baby. That pregnant woman is a mother. And echoing what my colleague here had to say, you don't want to victimize them yet a second time with the loss of the life that the Lord put in their womb to give them. You see, my Savior said that he came that we might have life and have it more abundantly. I'm also an ordained minister. He also said in Deuteronomy 30:19 that I set before you blessing and cursing, life and death, choose life. Now it is traumatic. Rape is horrific. And there really are no words to tell you, to describe to you how that makes you feel. But you take that and for me, my relationship with the Lord as an adult helped bring healing. Forgiveness is my superpower, just saying. And I know that the trauma of incest and rape, having been molested by a family member when I was a little girl, uncovered me, which led to other lascivious behavior and self-loathing and things that led to a promiscuous lifestyle, behavior that led to, not my fault, but a rape. And it's never a good idea to take an innocent life, for the shedding of innocent blood is on our hands, and we will be judged and we will be held accountable. And I serve a God that looks at his creation and chose to send his son to die for us. An innocent life, again, was sacrificed for the salvation of all mankind. And his blood covers all of us, and we have a responsibility to protect the mother and the baby, because adoption is a loving option. I have an adopted sister, so it's personal for me on every level. And so life, and that life more abundantly, extends to the mother and the baby. Let's focus on providing wraparound services to the mom. Let's focus on helping the pro-life commitment. I serve on the board of the Opelousas Pregnancy Center, and we provide resources, counseling, tangible resources for the pregnant moms in crisis that come to see us. So life is not just about saving the baby, but it's the quality of life for the baby and the mom moving forward. You understand? That's what pro-life is, from the womb to the tomb and from the cradle to the grave.
Ms. Smith, you're over
Thank
time.
you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. My name is Dr. Damon Cudahy. My 20-year medical career includes over 4 years of active duty service in the U.S. Army. Of that, I spent 13 months in Iraq as a battalion surgeon. I cared for U.S. military as well as civilians, Iraqi civilians, most of whom actually were women. As a board-certified obstetrician and gynecologist, I've been taking care of women in the state of Louisiana for the past 10 years. During this time, I've also served in the capacity as a lead expert witness for the Louisiana Department of Health in defending laws that this body, this legislature has passed, in particular the Unsafe Abortion Protection Act that was being litigated 2014 to 2015. 2 years ago, I was here in person testifying in favor of the Abortion Pill Reversal, Disclosure Act, another more recent thing. But most importantly, in my personal life, I've been married for 22 years to a wonderful woman. I have 3 daughters of my own, one of whom is with me here today to also oppose this bill. I too have an adopted sister, so adoption is something close to my heart as well. And with my patients, just yesterday morning, I met a newly married patient who sadly had a tragedy that she shared with me. But she also shared with me that she herself was conceived in rape. And she had wanted to come here today, but she wasn't able to get time off work. So she did. I know that she appreciates me just sharing her personal witness of wanting to oppose this bill as well. I want to speak to what this administration of Criminal Justice Committee is really about. We've heard a lot of gut-wrenching testimony about how evil, how horrific rape is, and I could not agree more about that crime. And these are emotionally charged. These are serious crimes. They need to be dealt with seriously. There needs to be serious punishment for the perpetrators of this. And so I think that we need to recognize there's justified anger. There's a desire for justice. There's a desire for punishment, for vengeance against the crime that was committed. And I would posit to you that we need to direct this desire for justice, this anger, to the criminal perpetrator, not to either of the innocent victims. And so, if someone needs to be punished with the death penalty, as my other colleague mentioned, it's simply an injustice to apply the death penalty to an innocent child that may be conceived in these cases. If the death penalty needs to be expanded in the state, we need to consider applying it. It would be more just to apply the death penalty to rapists, not to the innocent children. And then as applying to the benefit of the women who have suffered this, I would dispute, in my professional opinion, that there is any health, mental health benefits or physical benefits as related to the mental health served by her being subject to an abortion. I'll come to that if I don't have more time than that. But I want to just state that, personal political beliefs aside, the simple objective truth from a scientific, biologic, and medical standpoint is that the child conceived by sexual assault is every bit a human being as each other child, and in fact, is each one of us in this room.
I have a question. Ms. Smith, you testified that you yourself were a victim and a survivor of a rape.
Yes, sir.
When that happened to you, you had the choice to decide if you wanted to continue that pregnancy or not at that time. Is that correct?
I did have the choice.
And what you want us to do is to take that extremely personal decision away from the victim and put it in the hands of the legislature to decide. Is that correct?
I want to leave it in the hands of God. I want to leave it in the hands of the one that put that life in my womb. That's what I'd like to do.
Thank you.
And you serve
Thank you. Representative Knox.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Doctor, I didn't get your name.
Damon Cudahy.
Thank you. And you mentioned that you served in Iraq?
I did, yes, sir.
Thank you for your service. I also served
Thank you as well.
in combat as well.
All right.
When you served, you fought for freedom, right?
Yes, sir.
So can you help me understand, as you sit here today, why do you want to take freedom away, particularly for women?
Yeah, my understanding of freedom is
Gentlemen,
freedom.
we're not going to clap and we're not going to boo. If you have to do that, you have to be outside.
My understanding of freedom is that our freedom is freedom to do the good, to do the right. I don't consider it freedom for me to be able to assault a woman. I wouldn't consider that freedom. I would consider that, something that I should not be allowed to do. So freedom to me is freedom to take care of patients, according to my conscience and what I believe is what I have understood and discerned to be the best treatment for them based on the available medical evidence. And that, is why, in studying this issue, we look at what happens to women who've had abortions, and there's ample research showing that abortion causes serious psychological harm to women. Women are far more likely to commit suicide if they've had an abortion. So that, is why I don't believe that. I think it's a false sense of freedom to suggest to a woman that she is going to benefit by having an abortion, even in these tragic situations.
Thank you for that. And I can respect and appreciate your stance and position on that.
Thank you.
When I fought, and I'm not sure what branch you fought in, but when I fought for the Constitution. I fought on behalf of everyone having decisions to make of their own, not for the state to make. I don't want to get into the back and forth.
Sure.
You and I would never agree, but I think we can agree on the fact that there are certain rights and liberties that are extended to all of us. And we are in a position now today of talking about taking rights away from certain people within our population, particularly women. And I'm trying to have a rationale in my mind. How do you, as someone who served on the battlefield as I did, think that's appropriate?
Well, because the Constitution was based on the Declaration of Independence, which is based on natural law that listed among the unalienable rights, first and foremost, life and then liberty. So if we can't respect the life, then the idea of liberty has no more meaning. So I was fighting for the Constitution in the same way, but I just had a priority of life that we should be defending.
As you defined it?
As medical science has confirmed it to be, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The board is clear. With the next three witnesses that would like to speak in opposition, Clelly Carpenter is present. Are you present? Heather Hobbs and Dustin Bertrand. Whoever would like to go first.
Go first. Good morning. My name is Claylee Carpenter. I am on the board of Baton Rouge Right to Life. But what I would like to share this morning is from the perspective of a sidewalk counselor at Delta. For over 10 years, my husband and I, along with others, prayed outside Delta Clinic, reaching out to any abortion-minded woman willing to speak to us. Out of the 2,500 abortions that took place there annually, we were able to encourage an average of 80 to 90 women every year to keep their babies. I want to share with you what it was that changed their minds and how that relates to this morning. Again, given the opportunity, we would ask moms about the circumstances that led to them to Delta. Some were heart-wrenching, and abortion seemed their only solution. We discussed options such as adoption, resources, financial support, as well as housing. For example, two mothers, one who had been raped and another for financial reasons, stayed with us for the duration of their pregnancies. But it was not necessarily the offer of assistance that changed their minds. It was as I began to talk about the mother's baby, how far along she was, and showing pictures of what the baby looked like at that stage. The mothers often confessed that they had no idea believing the lie that what the abortion would remove was only a blob of cells. But as I was able to explain the humanity of the unborn from the moment of conception, and explain that yes, he may not look very human at first, but he looks exactly like he's supposed to look at that stage of development. He has all the DNA he will ever need to grow to adulthood. He doesn't become human. He is already human, fully alive with all the criteria for that are being met. It was then that reality began to sink in, and the mom was more likely to talk about keeping her baby or putting the baby up for adoption. I believe if our culture embraced the scientific, well-established truth of a person being a living human being from conception, it would solve most of the arguments surrounding the abortion issue. In my opinion, to be pro-life is to honor and protect the individual humanity and dignity of the unborn beginning at conception, and to grant that individual the right to life and freedom, no matter the circumstances and challenges surrounding the pregnancy. Pro-life is not legislation that only honors the unborn after 24 weeks gestation, but not before, or after 20 weeks gestation, but not before, as was the case in Louisiana. Nor does pro-life legislation redefine itself with a list of exceptions, apart from the life of the mother, which is understood. In light of the many states where women can still seek abortion, I'm proud, very proud, that Louisiana is 100% pro-life. And I want to thank all the legislation that's taken place over the years to get us to that place, and the overwhelming support of citizens in Louisiana for the Love Life Amendment. I say let's keep it that way.
Ms. Carpenter, you're over time, ma'am.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Please pay attention. When that light is blinking yellow, it's 30 seconds. I don't like interrupting people.
That's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. I'm Heather Hobbs. Thank you so much for being here with me and hearing my testimony. I am really grateful for your time, truly. I am here representing my beautiful daughter, Alexandria. She is an absolute miracle. She's got bright blue eyes and sandy blonde hair, and she is truly an angel here on earth. And so I'm bringing a voice to her. I am not new to the world of trauma, rape, and violence. My biological father and grandfather are convicted pedophiles who were part of a pedophile ring in Florida. And that was the start of my childhood. That continued that lifestyle that I was in. I was raised in a very pro-abortion household. I was taught all of the arguments that we've heard before, and I mean no disrespect to those who have suffered trauma as I have. But when I was 19 years old, I was raped and tortured for 3 days. And I did contemplate abortion, as I would think most women do, because that is what society says we should do, that we are somehow hurting women if they are forced to carry a rapist baby. But I would say that my child is not the child of a rapist, but the child of a rape survivor, because I believe the term survivor changes that mentality that the woman has, because when we stay in victimhood, when we keep ourselves in victimhood, we are keeping the power in the hands of the rapist, and that is a huge part of the issue. My daughter helped me with healing. She brought me a sense of love and peace that I'd never experienced before, and only a child, an innocent child, can offer that. Unfortunately, with abortion, we are trying to treat a trauma with another trauma. And traffickers, which I now perform human trafficking rescues at our southern borders, which often has young girls who have been raped repeatedly. Traffickers, rapists, and pedophiles love abortion because it helps cover up their crimes. We need to punish the rapist, not the babies. We need to offer supportive and loving resources for the women. We need to offer them therapy, healing, counseling. We do not need to tell them that they're not strong enough, good enough, or able to take care of a baby. Even if it means adoption, whatever resources we need to offer her, we do that. And we punish the rapist. Now, I will tell you, imagine the scenario. If your father went and raped someone today, and instead of going to his door, we knocked on yours and gave you the death penalty, would that be fair? I want to raise my children in a world where we do not discriminate based upon race, gender, disability, or way of conception. We should not have discriminatory exceptions in our laws, period. Abortion is anti-woman, and to try to treat a woman with a trauma is not the right route. Thank you for your time, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
My name's Dustin Bertrand, and I just want to thank y'all for y'all time and y'all's ears and whatnot. I'm here to share a story of a vulnerable woman and an innocent child. I was born and raised by my mom. Her name's Christine. For the first 6 years of my life, by her and my extended family. By the time I was 7, she met my stepfather, and he raised me and blessed me with a younger brother. When I got to high school, I began to understand that life was different. People had a different understanding of who I was compared to my mom and my brother, and my grandmother. When I started to date people of interest, I started to realize people put me in a different box. They had an issue with me, especially the parents. I was too tall, dark, and handsome for some. Emphasis on the dark if you haven't noticed. So for the first time in my life, I realized there was a racial barrier in my life that I was going to have to deal with, but I had no way to combat it, defend it or whatnot. I get to college, McNeese State University on a small golf scholarship. I spent 2008, 2012 there. Come my sophomore year, 2009, my body kind of starts to fail me. Make a long story short, I had to have open heart surgery in New Orleans, Louisiana at the Children's Hospital. When I had to do that, I had to fill out paperwork so I can undergo the surgery and whatnot because I was over 18 years old. And when I did that, there was a line in that kind of like changed my life and kind of increased the desire in me that I wanted to know something. There was a 2 or 3% chance I could die. And when I knew that, I wanted to know where was the dad that never was around. Stepfather did a great job, had an amazing family, grew up in South Louisiana. But where did it all begin? Where was the story? Where was the dad that just never wasn't around? And so I go to my mom. She tells me a story that forever changes my life, and I'll never forget it. In 2009, in August, in Abbeville, Louisiana, south of the airport, on a green picnic table over some gravel rocks next to a gray Lincoln owned by my grandmother, it changed my perspective as a man and what I wanted to become. She goes to tell you, Dustin, I can't tell you where you began because I really don't know your biological father. You've been wanting to know that desire for many years, and I'm sorry, I'm disheartened that I haven't been able to tell you that. But the story is that I went out with a couple of friends on a Louisiana Saturday night one night, and I remember being in this place for about an hour, and the only thing I remember next is waking up in this apartment building, this hotel building, whatever you want to call it, not knowing how I got there, who brought me there. And then I did like most strong women in the world do, right? When something like that traumatic or embarrassing happens, I put my best foot forward and just kind of try to push it away. Where I was pregnant. And guys, unfortunately for me, 9 months later, she said yes to life and yes to being my mom on a daily basis. Guys, yes, I may not have been conceived willingly. Yes, my mom may have been raped, date raped to be more specifically, but she has still been able to unconditionally love me in a way that I have never felt loved by anyone else. She was able to become one of the best Farm Bureau agents in the state of Louisiana, put me in a private school and high school and get me to the university level. And then I was able to, in turn, be a person that never raped her, to be a man that stayed constant and loved her and my mother, and loved her, my mom, and my grandmother. So guys, don't question my value just because I wasn't conceived willingly. I can bring healing and hope to the world as well. And so has my mom brought it to me.
Thank you. The board is clear. We have more. We have, I think I have 6 or 7 more that would like to speak in opposition. Is John Raymond present? If so, come down. Chris Alexander, are you present? And also Christy Hike. Are all 3 present? Are you Mr. Raymond by any chance?
John Raymond.
John Raymond. Okay. Do we have is Chris Alexander present? All right. What about Christy Hike? Is Christy Hike present? All right. I'm going to call some other names to come down. Let's see. Ben Clapper, Sarah Zagorski Jones. All right. Mr. Clapper is waving. Sarah Zagorski Jones present. Okay, you come down, and let's get one more. Richard Mahoney. Okay. All right, Mr. Raymond.
Thank you, honorable committee members. My name is John Raymond. I'm a member of the St. Tammany Republican Parish Executive Committee and the Louisiana Republican State Central Committee. I'm also the pastor of the church, founder of a Christian school, and owner of a major Christian radio station. Honorable committee members, as you know, the present law recently passed with overwhelming support from both the Senate and the House. During the committee debates of the present law, amendments were offered and discussed at length for the exceptions of rape and incest. These amendments were defeated in resounding fashion. These so-called exceptions do not represent minor revisions to the present law, but would in fact render the present law meaningless in a large percentage of the cases. First of all, if ending the life of an innocent unborn child is an inhumane crime, then it doesn't matter how the conception took place. It is still a crime against nature, as well as an unconstitutional robbing of an American's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When a child is murdered, he or she doesn't care who the father was. Secondly, if this bill is intended to reduce the emotional suffering of the mother, then a very large segment of the professional psychological community would strongly contend that the taking of the life of the baby before birth does not lessen the emotional trauma of the event of the rape or incest, but rather intensifies it and eliminates a primary potential path of emotional healing in the future. It simply turns one victim into two victims. Thirdly, in the most practical sense, the proposed law would guarantee clogged courtrooms and jails bursting at the seams from all of the false claims of rape when in fact the sexual encounter was consensual. All a woman would have to do is tell her doctor that she said no at some point in the sexual encounter, and the doctor would chalk it up as rape, and the abortion would be performed. This claim would be virtually impossible to disprove because, as we know, all those accused of rape are guilty until proven innocent, and the DNA would remove all doubt of who the father is. Then it would be just the woman's word against the man's word as to whether or not it was consensual. And while the proposed law shall not require a police report or forensic evidence or the prosecution of the alleged offense, the fact is that the crime of rape, especially in the event of a minor involved, requires mandatory prosecution, whether this law specifically requires it or not. Old girlfriends will clamor for the opportunity to put their old boyfriend or ex-lover behind bars in order to dispense with the inconvenience of giving birth. Meanwhile, there is no way to truly know who is being falsely imprisoned. In theory, prostitutes could claim rape on a repeated basis simply to avoid losing downtime due to multiple pregnancies. Honorable committee members, these bills are a sincere attempt to offer emotional healing and psychological protection for mothers who are victims of sex crimes, but it falls far short. This bill will simply reduce the present law to meaningless legislation, as well as create a disastrous legal nightmare in our courts and prisons paid for with taxpayers' dollars. Please vote no on House Bill 346.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, members of the committee and chair. My name is Sarah Zagorski, and I'm the communications director for Louisiana Right to Life. And the testimony I'm about to deliver comes from a woman I had the honor to meet who wanted to remain anonymous, who survived a brutal rape and a subsequent pregnancy. I remember the night I was raped very vividly. It was a Sunday night in August of 2005. I was being brought home by a family friend. On our way home, he pulled the car over into a dark, wooded area. He got out of the car and came over to the passenger side. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was getting what he deserved. He then proceeded to rape me. I was so scared, confused, and hurt. My body went numb, and all I could think about was, I wish this was over. When he finished, he dropped me off at the house. I sat on the front porch crying. I tried everything I could to forget what happened to me. 2 months after the rape, I started to notice that my body was changing. I was not feeling well, and I had not gotten my period. I finally broke my silence about what happened that night and told my best friend. She and I went to the store and bought a pregnancy test. My best friend referred me to a pregnancy center to confirm the pregnancy and to get information on what to do next. I was so scared and confused. At the pregnancy center, they did a pregnancy test and an ultrasound. When I heard the heartbeat of my unborn child, I became filled with so much love for the child growing inside me. When they asked me about the baby's father, I broke down and told them about the rape. They provided me with counseling and information about all the options that I had. I had a big decision to make. I was still dealing with the trauma of being raped, and now I've looked at being a single mom. Then I remembered the sound of the heartbeat. I decided at that moment that I was going to give this unborn child the right to live despite how he came to be. In May of 2006, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. When they placed him in my arms for the first time, I knew I made the right decision. Being my son's mom has brought me so much joy, from his first steps to the first time he said, "I love you." I've never looked at him and saw what happened to me. I've only seen an amazing child. The thing that helped me the most was the support and help I received from the pregnancy center. I did not feel like I had to go through this alone. I had people there to help and get me to the help I needed to move past the traumatic experience that I endured. Abortion does not take away the fact that you were raped. It does not take away the pain that you feel after being raped. Abortion is not the solution to these hard cases. We need to provide counseling and help for women that find themselves in the same situation. In honor of my son, I ask you to vote no to legislation that would legalize abortion in these cases. I also want to emphasize that this is a local New Orleans woman. I have one more story to share with you today.
You got,
Do I have time?
well, I don't want to interrupt
Okay.
you, but you're,
Okay. Final note, as I said, I'm the communications director for Louisiana Right to Life. We believe that the perpetrators of rape and incest should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, but that an unborn child born in that situation should not be given the punishment that the rapist should have. Thank you so much for your time.
thank you. Yes, sir.
My name is Rich Mahoney. I'm here to prove to you today this has nothing to do about abortion. Let me start. Governor John Bel Edwards, the abortion industry and the media are trying to undermine the laws in our state regarding the protection of innocent babies in the womb and have done everything they can to hide the criminal activity of the abortion cartel. And now they prey on vulnerable women to sway support for their gruesome carnage by highlighting tragic circumstances to sway public support. Governor John Bel Edwards has recently aired several pronouncements to the media of his support for allowing abortions back to our state for cases of rape, incest, and the health of the mother. He cites compassion for women as his argument. However, not only his compassion arguments misguided, they contradict everything he says he believes and the dictates of truth and reason. First, Governor Edwards signed into law that Plan B would be required under the law to be stocked in every emergency room in the state. Plan B either prevents ovulation or makes implantation of the tiny baby in the womb impossible. The morning after pill, which is the same effect, is dispensed at nearly every pharmacy in the state, according to Governor Edwards, and his allies would have the same consequences as any abortion. Nefarious Planned Parenthood gives morning after pill to the minors they see and tells them, after you have sex this weekend, take the morning after pill and you won't worry about getting pregnant because it'll either prevent ovulation or kill the baby. So why is Edwards and the abortion cartel trying to bring back abortion deaths in our state? Why? Second, Edwards cites his opposition to the death penalty, saying that, we might kill an innocent person. But wait a second. You might kill an innocent person, but you don't worry about how many babies will die and they might be innocent? Third, the abortion cartel in this state, as you can see, and we can go on all day, you can ask any questions. They had no rape and incest documented on report of induced terminal pregnancy for 30 years. Only after I got it to Congress that they started reporting, and their highest report was 37. That's 0.004% of the abortions done in our state. Where is the facts about rape in our state? It's hidden by all of you who have allowed the DHH and the abortion cartel to falsify those reports. I have all the documents here, and I'm going to be testifying 4 other times, so I'll squeeze it in. Thirdly, what are you going to do for those who rightly reject these evils from being complicit with your crimes? No human being should be put to death without the due process of law, and every baby in the womb would probably be born before you could determine if a rape had truly been perpetrated, or whether you could identify the assailants by DNA analysis. Abortion from rape, incest, and futility account for only 0.004% of the abortions in the state. Since my time is running quick, I'd like you to ask me questions so I can go on and tell you the truth. This is not about abortion in our state. This is the abortion cartel's manifesto to bring abortion back into every state. I go to their meetings. They said, let us bring abortion back. You just have to cry, rape, rape, rape. Kansas, a pro-life state, voted in murder. Why? Rape, rape, rape. And I can show you that they and our state have perpetrated the crime and allowed the rapist to go free. Kill the rapist, not the baby.
You're over time. Thank you, sir. Mr. Raymond, do you support the proposition that taking any life is a sin? You support that?
There are times when taking a human life, for example, the death penalty is certainly supported in Scripture, but taking the life of an innocent person is never supported in Scripture.
Thank you. The board is clear. We have one more red card present in opposition wishing to speak, which is Dr. William Hall. Oh, here? All right, if Chris Alexander is present, I passed you. You weren't present, but you can come down now. We have a seat. All right, and again, look, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not trying to not let people speak, but when I have the cards and when we're rolling, I'm not going to keep adding new people to speak if you haven't already turned in the card. But Woody Jenkins, that'll be the last one that we have that's present and wishing to speak in opposition. Okay. Who'd like to go first?
Well, since I'll learn most of what I know about this issue from the man sitting to my right, I'm going to defer to him.
All right, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members, thank you. My name is Woody Jenkins, and I did serve on this committee for many years. And 33 years ago, I sat right here. It was a different room. It was a packed house, and it was the legislation to prohibit abortion in our state with no exceptions. And next to me was Dr. Jerome Lejeune, who was of the University of Paris. He was the world's leading geneticist. He was the one who first discovered that disease can come from a chromosomal error. He had discovered that Down syndrome was caused by an error at the chromosomal level. The Sunday before the meeting, the Advocate had a big story on the front page. They had polled each of the 10 members of the committee. 8 members of the committee said they would under no circumstances vote for the bill unless it had exceptions for rape and incest. Only 2 said that they would vote for a no exceptions bill. But after Dr. Lejeune's testimony, everybody changed their mind, and the bill passed 10-0. I can't do his testimony justice, but I'll mention a couple of things that he said. And if you remember that name, Dr. Jerome Lejeune, or we say Lejeune in Louisiana, Dr. Jerome Lejeune. He's been beatified now, and he's on his way to becoming a saint. And he stayed with us for a week while he was here testifying. But here's what he said to that committee 33 years ago in the seats where you're sitting. He said, the symphony of life begins at the moment of conception. There's no question when life begins. There's no question when the new human being begins. It begins when the 23 chromosomes of the father and the 23 chromosomes of the mother unite. He said, at that time, all the information is there. This is not an it, he said. This is a he or a she from that moment. And at that moment, there's 6 times the Encyclopedia Britannica written in the DNA about you, your sex, your race, your propensity for athletics, your propensity for your range of intelligence. Those things are said at that moment of conception. And he said, how is it that so much information, 6 times the Encyclopedia Britannica, can be in such a small thing as one strand of DNA? He said, do you realize that if you had one strand of DNA from every person who ever lived, it would fill up 1.5 thimbles full? And yet, he said, all that information is stored. And he says, we now know how it is stored. And if you'll listen carefully to me, I'm going to tell you something that will amaze you, I think. He said, you know, the DNA is about 1 meter long. He said, Jeffries in England has recently discovered how the information is stored. He stretched out one strand of DNA on the lab table, and then he stretched it like this. And it became so clear. I want to ask you something. Is anybody here?
We're out of time.
I thought I had 3 minutes.
You did. You see the red light that blinked?
Was that 3 minutes?
That was 3 minutes.
Okay. Look at your barcode because it's stored in exactly the same way. The thickness of the bars and the distance between them is how it's stored in the DNA.
Thank you. Who's going to go next?
Chairman Marino, thank you for allowing me to come and speak for a few moments today. My group is the Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, and I've looked frankly at
You have to
all.
introduce yourself. I'm
Chris
sorry.
Alexander is
Yes,
my
sir.
name,
Yes, sir.
otherwise referred to as Katie's husband. I sometimes forget my real name. But I wanted to come in here and register our strong opposition not only to this legislation, but to all of the bills that are pending here today, because in our view, having reviewed them, all of them are designed in one way or another to undermine the statutory protections for the unborn in the state of Louisiana. And it's pretty clear by reading the legislation that that's what it's designed to do. Louisiana is known as a state that protects the unborn. And frankly, I view the unborn as the very least among us. And as a Christian in particular, I take to heart the words of Jesus Christ when he said, "What you do or allow to be done to the very least of these, you do to me." And I cannot think of any segment of our society that is more defenseless or more vulnerable than the unborn. I can remember when I was growing up, my mom started the first pregnancy referral center in Shreveport, and former Representative Jenkins has known my mother for a long time, and I've learned most of what I know about this issue from them. I can remember my mom in the front seat of our station wagon with many of her children. She had 12. I'm the sixth of 12 in the back seat of her station wagon while she was riding around in Shreveport counseling a young girl who was pregnant and doing everything that she could to save that unborn child's life. And even when the young girl carried the child to term, she would continue to work with her. The girl would be over at our house. We met the kids' daughters. My mom didn't stop there for her. But the bottom line is, in all those years, no matter what the circumstances of that pregnancy, I can tell you right now, never one time did I hear my mom or this gentleman right here ever counsel a young lady to go in and sacrifice that unborn child's life. Never once. And that's not a solution to the problem. We can have compassion for women in unfortunate situations and also protect the core right of the unborn to live. And I'm here for that reason today, and I'm proud to stand on behalf of the unborn. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Will Hall, and I'm the Director for the Office of Public Policy with the Louisiana Baptist Convention. I represent about 1,600 congregations and about 500,000 baptized members, and I'm here to urge you to protect the unborn. I'm going to urge you not to make another victim out of a traumatic situation. I want to speak to you that Louisiana Baptists put their money and resources where their mouths are. We just don't say be pro-life and then have the baby and don't respond to that. We provide many ministries, and I hate to say this just on behalf of Louisiana Baptists because I know Catholics have tremendous ministries that do the same thing. Assemblies of God, Pentecostals, Methodists, they're just a number of churches that do likewise. We provide health care and support and counseling for mothers and their unborn children. In some situations, we provide health care for the baby up to 2 years after birth. We provide adoption care, foster care, and orphan care. In fact, if you're an orphan in our ministry and you want to go to college, we give you a free college education. We take care of women who are victims of domestic abuse. We rescue women and children out of human trafficking. Those are some of the ministries. But I just want you to know we put our money where our mouths are on this issue. And I want to speak from a personal position as well. I have abortion is not a theoretical issue for me. And I have a son who's Down syndrome, and he's not the victim of rape or incest, but I can tell you that when you get a diagnosis like that, it's traumatic. And in fact, I was a young naval aviator. I've been successful in a cockpit. I've been successful on staff tours. When my wife received that diagnosis, and we had great medical care. In fact, her physicians were at Walter Reed, one of the best facilities in the world. But we began to get these diagnoses and these recommendations that were horrifying. We were told over and over what kind of horrendous creature our son would be, the financial ruin he would bring to me, As a naval aviator, I flew a $32 million aircraft, but I didn't make $32 million. I was told how it would ruin my career, how it would destroy my marriage, how it would rob my other children of blessings. My son happened to be here in 2016 to testify, and some of you were here for passage of HB 1019, Jacob's Law, which prevents the abortion of a child just because they're diagnosed with something like Down syndrome. And if he was here, I will tell you quickly, he can't memorize the multiplication tables. He has difficulty counting 1 to 20, but he can recite Psalm 23 from heart. That child has value. Every child has value. And there are other options than trauma, in the traumatic situation, than killing an innocent life. Don't make another victim of a traumatic situation. Vote against this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, the board is clear. I have present in opposition that do not wish to speak. I'm going to place all of these into the record. And there are 83 cards in that category that we will be placing into the record. If I could ask the bill author to return to the table at this time, please. Rep. Boyd, I'm not sure if you are intending to introduce an amendment or not. I'm just I know that there is potentially one that you have. I'm just trying to see if that's something that you want to do or not do at this time.
No, I just want to close.
Okay. Well, I think we have a question or two for you before the close. Rep. Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first want to say thank you, Representative Boyd, for bringing this bill. Thank you for your strength, because I know it wasn't an easy decision to bring this. But I want to highlight the point. When you shared your personal story with us, most, I assume, were not aware.
Right.
And for that, you've inspired a lot of people. And some may not be aware that I, too, was born to a 15-year-old. And that is the point in all of this. There are young women among us that we don't know what their story may be. There's been a lot said about trauma. There's been a lot said about PTSD. And I am on the record to indicate that I suffer from PTSD. And some of our colleagues also suffer from PTSD. Some of our colleagues have members who were former law enforcement officers, firefighters, and there are certain things that can trigger us. I can't fathom a body mandating a young girl who was brutally raped by some big monster. This is a hard issue. This is an emotional issue. It's emotionally draining for most of us. But I can't fathom a time where we would mandate a young teenage girl who is immature, who cannot, as you say, articulate for herself her experience. Our former president, Donald Trump, talks a lot about rapists, most of whom from Mexico. And if that is our big bad monster in a scenario where some of our individuals may say, no exception, and I would ask my colleagues, if the big bad monster raped your daughter, your niece, your granddaughter, your neighbor, your colleague, how would you feel? How would you feel when you have to look at your daughter, your grandchild, every day, knowing the trauma and the PTSD that you have to suffer? Looking at that child every day, triggering you. emotionally and mentally every day. What kind of life is that? I respect everyone on both sides of this issue. I respect the ones who testified and said they gave birth to their children. I respect the fact that they love those kids. You and I know all too well what that's like.
Yes.
But for some of us in this room, that is a difficult thing to do every day, to look an unwanted child in the eyes. And believe me, I'm trying everything I have in me right now to keep from being triggered from the testimonies that I've heard this morning. And I know you are too. And your bravery is inspirational to me. And what I would ask for everyone, regardless where you sit on this issue, it's a hard issue. It's a hard issue. But in that case, we have to have some kind of leniency. When I first came to this body,
Rep. Knox,
one of our colleagues, I'm about to wrap up.
Thank you.
We talked about the art of compromise. I would compromise on any bill that comes before us if it means giving these young women some measure of dignity that they already have to go through in life with a choice of doing an abortion. I would give any compromise on any bill that comes before this body in favor for this exception. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Rep. Marcel.
Thank you. You know, I was always for an exception. We both stood on the same principles that we allow people to make those decisions for themselves. I heard this testimony on last year, even though I missed much of it today. I had another bill in another committee. I stand by the same values that I stood by last session. And those values are not forcing a young person, 10, 11, 12 years old, to carry a baby where that's incest or rape. I just don't believe that it's fundamentally right. We talk about God all the time, but God allows us to make choices. He doesn't force anyone to even come to him. He allows us to make our own choices. And whatever those choices are, we have to live with it. We have to live with those choices. You know, I applaud you for bringing this bill. And you know, I'll say what I said last year. When I heard Representative Knox asking the question, if your daughter gets raped, if your granddaughter gets raped, if your aunt, your colleague gets raped, then wouldn't you want that? The truth of the matter is, they will get it because they will take their child to wherever state or wherever they got to do to make sure that that child is not born. That's the truth of the matter, if people really want to be honest. But the people who cannot afford to do that will not have that option. So I don't know if you've had a motion on your bill yet, but if you have not, I'd like to move it favorably at the proper time. And thank you for this heavy lifting. I know it's tough. I know you got a lot of nasty emails, but it's all right. It's the right thing to do for the people of the state of Louisiana to allow them to make their choices when that rape or incest happens.
Thank you, Rep. Marcel. One more thing, I'm going to let you close, Rep. Boyd. There was an email that some of the members on this committee have showed me that purports to be from Joseph Marino requesting the committee to vote against your bill. And I would just, for clarification purposes, that is absolutely positively not from me. I don't know how it came out. I don't know what they did to do that, but I'm telling you right now that I did not send any email to this committee asking them to oppose your bill. You may close, Rep. Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members, and thank you to everyone who testified today on both sides. When I initially wrapped up my opening statement, I went to the back, and Rep. Bacala came and said, I'm glad that your mother didn't have the option because you're here. Aren't you glad that you're here? I am. I'm very blessed in every aspect of my life, but I would not want to sacrifice a life for a life. My mother did not survive her trauma. It was overwhelming for her, and she didn't have a choice in the 60s. Now, I don't know if the choice had been afforded to her, what decision she would have made. I do know that I was born into a trauma from a woman who had experienced a trauma. And the first 12 years of my life were unmentionable and unbearable. And I, too, sit here exposing myself because of the need to expose myself. What I'll tell you as an adult is none of my childhood traumas nor my adult successes, and I've experienced blessings on top of blessings, give me the right to decide for another family what to do in their household. We've heard testimony from pastors today, one who actually was arrested for crimes against juveniles, by the way, who spoke against this. In this body, we are supposed to separate church from state. We're supposed to understand that people have the freedom to choose whatever religion they want. By enforcing this, we take that right away from them. This bill does not mandate abortion. It just gives the option of. That child, that woman that experienced that rape may still decide to go through with the pregnancy. And I support that person. I applaud that person because I am a product of that. But I also know from looking back at my young mother at my age, in my mid-50s, I understand now the trauma that she was living in. The trauma that she was probably forced to relive daily just looking at me. I get it today. I didn't always understand it, but I get that today. And what I want to do with this bill is to restore that ability to women to decide to choose what they want to do with their lives. I'm not discounting anyone else who came up here and told their story about being a child of rape, because here I sit as well. But even with that, it is not my right to decide how that woman chooses, how that family chooses to handle their situation in their household with their child, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever that age is. We should afford them the ability to choose how they want to proceed with that. And with that, I ask for your favorable passage. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion from Representative Marcel. Rep. Bacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wasn't going to bring up the private conversation, but I'm thankful to know you, and I know you're a Christian woman, and your story is almost, to me, is the compelling story.
Do you have a motion?
I do.
Okay.
I do, but may I?
Yes, sir.
I would, because of who you are and how you came to be, I would object to the motion.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion from Representative Marcel to report this House bill favorably. Representative Bacala has objected. Ms. Wyman, please call the roll. The motion is to report House Bill 346 favorably.
Representative Bacala? No. No. Representative Bryant? Yes. Yes. Representative Edmonston? Yes. No. Representative Fontenot? No. No. Representative Garofalo? No. Representative Gudo? No. No. Representative Hodges? No. Representative Horton? No. Representative Knox? Yes. Yes. Representative LaFleur? Yes. Yes. Representative Marcel?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Muscarello? No. No. Representative Seabaugh?
No.
No. Representative Villio? No. Representative Marino?
Yes.
Yes. 5 yeas, 10 nays.
Thank you.